Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for being part of my second episode of From My Couch to Your Couch. And it is a platform where I gather colleagues and great friend of mine to discuss various topics that is really about continuing the healing process in and out of traditional therapeutic spaces. And so I thought it would be wonderful to gather some esteemed colleagues of mine to have a discussion about what's going on in the world in 2020 and its impact on the Black community, and also recognizing the duality of us as Black people and Black therapy. So wanting this to really be a cathartic conversation for us in coming together, as well as connecting to the Black community about the collective grief, the trauma that we are experiencing in the times of COVID-19, as well as, again, the ongoing injustice of Black bodies and Black minds and Black hearts. So I would first like to, again, thank you all for being a part of this discussion. And I would like to start with introductions. So if you could say your name, something about yourself, and also in 1 or 2 sentences describe what experience shaped your lens into Blackness. So anyone can go first, whoever wants to jump in.
I'll go first. Well, my name is Christopher Brown. My office is located in Pearland, Texas. What has shaped my lens, my Black lens? I come from older parents. I'm not certain if that's a common experience or not, but my dad is 89, my mom is 83. Both were from Alabama, and I'm the youngest of 5. The experience has really been from my parents, one that was really encouraged me to support and celebrate Blackness. My dad as an entrepreneur, my mom as a dedicated housekeeper, if you would say, a homekeeper. She made sure that the needs of all the children were taken care of, ensured, all the things that, well, Dad was out. Learned some significant things as far as foundationally from them and their understanding of supporting our community as being extremely important. So that's kind of where my lens comes from.
My name is Saudia Turney, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Pearland and Friendswood, which is just south of Houston. My lens is shaped similar to a lot of things that Shalavia said before she cut off. I grew up in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. I'm first generation American. Both my mom and my dad were born in South America. They were born in British Guyana, which is, the only English speaking country in South America. And they kind of associate it with the Caribbean, even though it's not an island, it's attached to the continent of South America. I grew up in predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, but I went to private schools my whole life. I was the only Black girl in my graduating class. So there was a lot of shifting in environment. So being in raised in predominantly all white education, having immigrant parents that very much talked about the distinction between being Black American and being Caribbean. I've kind of floated around in multiple worlds all my life, and that has definitely shaped how I see things now.
I can go next. My name's Christine. I am currently living in the Fort Lauderdale, Florida area. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm a professor of family therapy. I grew up in Dallas, and I believe that my shaping when it comes to my Blackness, similar to everyone else, was definitely informed by my family. So I really consider myself African American. My father's from Nigeria. And then my mom, her family, a lot of our roots are in San Antonio, Texas. So I also went to school with predominantly white people. A lot of whiteness was around, but my family was very clear on making sure that we were empowered as a Black family, as Black children.
I'll go. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Giancarlo Simpson. I'm a registered mental health counseling intern, hopefully for like a few more weeks, and then I become licensed. This is my fourth year in the Ph.D. program for marriage and family therapy at Nova Southeastern, and I'm also an educator at Lynn University. And honestly, my framework, I'm not from this country. I'm originally from Jamaica. And coming here, I had to learn to really understand like American history and also look at it from, you know, the lens of an outsider and obviously someone that's living inside of it as well. Because I can't just pull out my green card and be like, hey guys, I'm not from a different country. You know what I mean? I'm Black regardless. So I will actually say I was blessed to have a couple Black men as educators from like middle school to high school that really kind of helped shape my understanding of what the world is like and to look at things from a different perspective. One example is my high school teacher was teaching us about like redlining, things that at the time, a lot of us looking back at was like, we had no idea what that was about. But growing up in Maryland, that was something that was actually pretty common. We just didn't know it. So I was very thankful to, you know, to have honestly learned a lot from these guys, to be honest with you. And that definitely helped me frame how I look at the world now.
I can follow that up, actually. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adejare McMillan. I'm also a registered mental health counseling intern in the state of Florida. Hopefully getting licensed pretty soon myself. And I'm moving into my third year of the Ph.D. program, family therapy, at Nova Southeastern University. My lens of Blackness was shaped, I would say, primarily through my experience as a first-generation American child. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, raised partially down here in South Florida. However, my mother was not born in the States, and my grandparents are from Trinidad and Tobago, respectively. Unfortunately, my mother passed when I was 13 years old, and so my grandparents took over in raising me. So I was raised primarily by my grandparents, uncles and aunts, and folks who are immigrants and were not born in this country. To add to that, I've had the opportunity to attend mostly Black middle schools and a historically Black high school for my primary education. And was not really truly harshly confronted with whiteness on a large scale, probably until getting into college. And so my experience with coming in contact with whiteness has been a lot, has been a lot to do with authority figures, higher ups, and folks that are in positions of power and influence.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Anetria Thompson-Hardeman, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. Been practicing for about 6 years now, almost. And I think my Blackness has been shaped, of course, by growing up in 3rd Ward, Houston, Texas, right here. And with my parents that were working class, didn't know we were poor because I always had everything we needed. But I attended mostly a lot of blended schools, mixed, white, Hispanic, everybody, and very grateful for my parents thinking about my education and saying, you know, they wanted me to be in environments with different cultures so I could be familiar with other groups and their values and things that were important to them. And so I've always believed in loving my people. I've always worked in the areas that need the most help and most support, because that's my way of giving back, making sure that when I was able to come up, that I would bring them up with me. So that's kind of what shaped my Blackness and the lens that I look through.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Teandra Gordon. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and author of the book Purposeful Parenting. I would say that my Blackness was shaped, I just believe very much in like generation to generation. I think it started back with my great-grandparents. They were sharecroppers in Louisiana, and they eventually earned enough money to purchase all 80 acres of land in which they sharecropped. And then it moves on to my grandparents who moved here to Houston and ended up bringing a civil rights suit against Houston Independent School District because post Brown versus Board of Education, they were still not willing to allow my aunt to attend the 9th grade. And so that's my mom's side of the family, which is from Louisiana and very much Creole heritage. That comes from white slave owners raping Black slaves and creating kind of a subculture within the Black community. And then my dad is a 6'4", dark-skinned Black male with strong Texas ties. So his experience had a lot to do with like the racism and the things that he experienced growing up here in the South. But he had amazing parents who just instilled in him that he was as good as anybody. And so I think that confidence from both sides of my family, the confidence in who I am as a Black woman and just the pride and kind of celebratory nature has shaped my Blackness over the years.
And I am Shameitra Green, licensed marriage and family therapist. I practice here in Pearland. I was born here in Houston. I grew up out in the Spring area though. And so I grew up around affluent white people. And so I was often the little brown girl with all of my white friends. And so one of the things that my family often talked to me about their experience and really the history of Black Americans based off of my grandparents, based off of my parents. My parents integrated the schools that I graduated from. And so I grew up hearing about what that experience was, which was very vital to me because I would just remember being one of the few Black faces in school. And when we would do Texas history and US history and having that slave conversation and all of my classmates looking at me like, are you okay? And so really being able to understand who we are as Black Americans through the history that my family provided for me. But my mother was just so intentional with, I believe, understanding. My daughter is going to be one of the few Black faces in these white spaces. And it is very important for me to help her to understand the richness of her Blackness. And so I am comfortable with holding down my Blackness and being very proud of who I am in the midst of white spaces. And that just kind of followed me throughout the years, even as we were family therapy students and now as colleagues, where I often find myself in conversations with my non-Black counterparts, having these ongoing conversations and, you know, really being able to just be comfortable in who I am as a Black American and as a Black woman, and, you know, educating and exposing in places where there needs to be. So hence my passion in bringing us all together at this time and being able to, again, connect as Black therapists, and also be able to connect to the Black community in this time of need. So I guess we'll get into our first questions to get this conversation moving. I would like to know, how have you been personally impacted by the duality of being a Black person as well as being a Black therapist during these times of COVID-19 and Black injustice that's ensuing in this country?
I'll say it's a lot because you're experiencing kind of the collective trauma that the world is experiencing while simultaneously trying to help others who are experiencing the same thing. So I think it's just been necessary to just be more intentional about my self-care for me personally, which is staying built up spiritually, like listening to my sermons, reading my Bible, and then exercising, running. Like that's that's something that really helps me. And so I think during this time, just having to be intentional about that. And then also, you know, not watching the news all the time, kind of dipping in and dipping out has been really essential, and spending a lot of family time.
I can piggyback off of Teandra and say, yes, self-care has been definitely increased recently. I've been in private practice for 12 years, and I've been pretty good about flowing out of my life and flowing into my clients' worlds pretty easily. And I've found myself having to really like put my stuff in a box and put it on hold, or in session grounding myself more than I normally do, just because I'm feeling that collective trauma. And it's hard to separate, you know, at times being there for the client and still acknowledging like, I got a lot of stuff going on inside of me right now. Having colleagues like you that I can staff cases with and vent with has also been extremely important. And I have found myself in positions with some of my clients, because I do have a very diverse population of clients, as being an educator, which at times I feel like that's kind of my soul's purpose, is to educate and to guide, and I am very comfortable in that. But then my humanity steps in sometimes, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. Go read a book, like go to somebody else other than me. But having to have that professional stance is, this is what they're coming to me for, and this is what I need to be able to provide for my clients, and separating whether I feel like I should have to, or the things that people say sometimes that's out of ignorance. It's a lot coming at me at one time, at me as a Black woman, and being able to navigate through that to have me as a therapist take the forefront has been a challenge.
Yeah, I want to echo those sentiments of challenge that you spoke of, Saudia. I in hearing this question, I actually wished for me that my experience was a duality, because in some ways that would seem better for me. But my experience is not a duality. I'm impacted in a multitude of different ways. One, as a Black man, obviously living in this country. Two, as a therapist, and then having to field all of the challenging questions from the clients, and you know, sometimes from colleagues and you know, counterparts. But then also working in the field as a community activist and organizer, and engaging in, you know, some of the protests and demonstrations and things like that carries a totally separate weight and sense of obligation. And so that is also taxing and exhausting. But then I'm also an older brother, I'm also a cousin, and I feel as though my responsibility to my family and to my loved ones, especially as someone who is educated and active in movement work, it has been to kind of push my cousins and my family in the right direction and towards the information that really truly is sound and not just propaganda, and not just being created to stir up drama and emotion and whatever else. So it's a constant feeling of being bombarded by everything that is happening, and sometimes not feeling like I have a place to go.
Felt like, oh, hello?
Yeah,
I felt at the beginning of this, man, it's almost actually 3 months since like we've been in like quarantine, which is crazy. So at the beginning of this whole process, honestly, I felt this personal pressure to do a lot with my Black clients. Like I just felt like there was this additional responsibility to be like this emotional advocate, this personal pressure of like not quote unquote failing the client, but it's a little different when it's working with a Black client, because one, we don't really go to therapy as much as we really need to. So it's like, I don't want to lose you, especially during a time like this. So I felt that when I was working with, one client in particular, and I I definitely had to recognize that. Dr. Belliard knows. So, so, you know, I had to recognize that. And that when we talked about like the idea of like coping, I don't look at it as always taking a step back from doing certain things. I actually look at it as doing stuff. For me, that's just how it functions for me. And as, you know, Ade talked about like community organizing, I'm getting back into that. And that's something that, you know, I definitely stepped away from, but now in this moment has really helped revitalize my spirit, to be honest with you. I felt like if I was sitting still and not doing something, in the back of my mind, it was like, it would be telling me I wasn't doing enough. And that would have put me into a whole different mood. So now that I'm actually proactively trying to get more involved, doing more things constructively, I feel that it's helping me get to a place where I need to be as far as coping and just being better.
My thoughts, I feel like kind of align with everyone else. It's been such an overwhelming past couple of weeks and just time period. And it's been really heavy for me. I went to George Floyd's funeral processional and I can't even put a feeling. I can't put a label on it yet. I haven't processed it enough, I don't think. And so being a Black therapist and being a Black, you know, person, it's like the two, you can't stop them from coming together. It's all intertwined. And so I think it's just my duty to kind of support my clients and however I can, but definitely like what Giancarlo was saying about with your Black clients, just being there for them and trying to understand and say it's okay because we're all in it together. It's like I can't even try to put that other part of me on pause because when we process it and talk about it, it's a lot that comes up. You know, it's been a lot of anger and tension. And we're all human, and so we experience it. But being out there and seeing it is just another feeling. So yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to try to separate the two when that's so much of who you are and who we are.
I think it's been an interesting experience over the last several months. Shameitra, who shares office space with me, will tell you I kind of go hard all the time with the number of clients I see. Typically, I will see 8 to 10 people every day. Which Shameitra has shared with me, you're gonna burn the heck out. But that's kind of that hard work ethic that goes back to those parents I talked about. I also have a diverse population of clients that come to see me. And to be perfectly honest, when I started out in this independent practice, I really didn't understand why, and this may sound weird, but why white folks was coming to me, because I was originally looking to be present for Black people. And but I also understood that our community still is very cautious about participating in counseling, engaging in this process. I think that has definitely changed over time. What I have really come about recently is that some of the things that we were working on, many of my clients are longstanding. Many of the things that we have been working on as far as individual growth, some of the couples I've been working with, a lot of those topics have kind of changed, if you would say, within the last several weeks. And I've realized that clients are coming in not necessarily talking about communication problems they've been having in their relationships, as much as now, how do I manage the feelings about what's taking place in our society right now, their engagement. Clients who have been a part of protest and needing to kind of process a variety of different things. And to be perfectly honest, just as said earlier, I have to gauge how much I take in outside of, watching the news, things of that nature, staying connected. But as I would tell many of my clients, you can't allow it to be notifications throughout the entire day. You can just become overly consumed by it and becomes very difficult. As a father of 2, I have a son that's in who we got home from New York, which was something that was pretty significant for me to have my family together as a whole. So trying to lead my family in discussions, a 20-year-old son, 15-year-old daughter. I guess really has been more than a duality. There've been multiple things. Yeah. It's just been challenging, I think, all the way around.
I think for me, I totally echo the sentiments of it being such a heavy time. I think years ago, I know I would have been different in this moment. Like now, I'm unapologetically who I am. So I totally hear you, Adejare, talking about really making sure that we are not even trying to separate the personal from the professional. So like Giancarlo and Adejare, they're my students. And what I know you all can attest to this, like Giancarlo has me in class this semester, the whole class, we may have had something else on the syllabus, we're processing. Mm-hmm. Everybody's gonna participate. And for me, the reason why I say I know I wouldn't have done this a few years ago, I think even continuing this process of decolonizing my own mind and helping my students do this and those that I work with, they were all affected by white supremacy in some way. And I know in the past, I would have made sure that my white students were comfortable, and almost, if I didn't even recognize that, I was prioritizing that. Now, you may be uncomfortable. That's okay. Of course, you're still important. You're a part of the process. But I have to be unapologetically myself too. And I know that that's so helpful because I think about what I would have wanted or needed when I was a student. And so I think for me, that's been empowering to try to see how can I empower the voices of those that I work with, if it's clients, if it's students. And then I'll say most Black people that come to our fields, we were already committed to this work. So I think now when people are now listening, it's like, you've already been doing this work. So yes, it's difficult, but you're ready. And so really just allowing space to support other Black therapists, to me, is just so critical, to have those spaces where we really can share and empower one another and know like what you're doing, it matters and you're ready. So I think that has been, for me, just so important right now, because some days I am tired and it is heavy, and I get to class and I'll say, this is heavy. And I know I can't be the only one feeling this way. And just knowing that even that can be so helpful as we navigate, these times.
I think for me, and I love what Saudia had said in her sentiments of, I always, just as a therapist in general, do an inventory over myself and how are you taking care of yourself? How are away from that and your boundaries? Because that's obviously going to impact how I show up in my therapeutic spaces with my clients. And I also feel that it is important bringing my own humanity into my sessions with my clients. Ultimately, to me, is what the gift of therapy is. They're not coming in for my expertise. They're coming in for my humanity, connecting with their humanity and having a conversation, having an understanding where they can give themselves permission to be able to feel what they feel, to face what they face, which on my personal side has been how I've been dealing with everything. I think being able to wake up and say, what are you giving yourself the permission to do today and to feel? So if on Monday I wake up and I'm angry, that's what I am. I'm angry, and I need to be able to figure out what I need to do in those spaces to nurture myself, to accept that's where I'm at, so that I can kind of allow that to come and go. If I wake up the next day and feel like I'm sad, or I'm a mixture of everything, in 5.5 seconds, I can be all over the emotional continuum, and being okay with that. And so there have been moments where not necessarily my clients, but my white colleagues will come in, and I'll get emails and texts of, I'm here and I'm sorry, and can we have a conversation, and can we talk? And again, as I stated before, I have this reputation where people will naturally have conversations and come to me about this, but being able to also respect my physical autonomy and my emotional autonomy and say, I appreciate that these conversations are there. I appreciate that they're wanting to be had. I appreciate, that when I'm ready to come to them, then we can have these conversations, but also giving myself the permission to not feel like I always have to be there for everyone when they need me, how they're needing, because of what's coming up for them now. As I also pay attention to what it is that I need. So that's been very important for me, and kind of going into the second conversation of us sharing with the Black community insight and awareness of how to cope, I've also had that conversation with some of my Black friends and my family. You know, the conversation of, it's good and I'm happy that people have kind of come aboard, and for whatever reason there's an awareness now that hasn't been there before. But I'm kind of angry about that too. Like, I'm kind of angry about, what is it about now that you are hearing my Black cries and my Black pain, when this for us has been happening time and time again, you know? And so really having to have conversations, because they'll come and say, well, you're a therapist, and, you know, how can I say what I mean but still, you know, not feel like I'm rejecting? And then I have some family and friends that's like, I really don't care. If I don't feel like talking, I don't feel like talking. If I don't feel like being a teacher, I don't feel like being a teacher. And letting everybody know that it's okay for you to feel how you feel on your emotional continuum. And so that's kind of how my self-care practices is pouring over into the advice that I'm giving to my clients, my loved ones, my friends, of how to cope, how to deal with all this heaviness that's coming our way. So in extending that over to you all, what are any vital messages or anything that you feel is necessary to share to, you know, Black people, the Black community, of different ways to cope, and, you know, being able to give themselves the permission to feel what they feel?
I would say one of the things is to be comfortable with your anger, and to understand that, you know, anger is not a bad thing. I think people always want to put anger into this one box away from every other emotion and assume like it's the worst thing in the world. When, for me at least, I believe that anger is like a protest for your needs not being met. So if I'm upset about something, it's because I'm not receiving something. And it's okay for you to be upset about not getting something as simple as, let's say, like, you know, opportunity in the workplace, or, you know, all these basic things as individuals. It's okay to feel that way because there's a reason behind it. So I just want to make sure we validate those feelings that oftentimes for us as people of color or Black folks are usually used against us or weaponized, like angry Black man or angry Black woman, whatever, to make sure these are things that are just normal for us to experience as well. And just because we voice our opinions about something doesn't mean that we're mad. Just because we stand up for ourselves doesn't mean that we're upset. You know, it just means that we're being assertive and we're being true to ourselves. And I think there's this, I don't know, I feel like it's been muddled with the definition of what those things are. And I think it's strategically been muddled towards us to make us feel like we can't express these things the way we want to. So I want us to get comfortable being okay with how we truly feel and be able to express that.
I agree. That was kind of along the lines of what I was thinking. Is I think that we need to be okay in this time of anger and grief, and not try to numb it, not try to ignore it, not try to push it away, because it needs to be dealt with. Like, the issues need to be addressed, but in the middle of that, just make sure that you're adding other things into your life and you're taking care of yourself, because that's how you can kind of stay in this place for the time that it's going to take for some really good systemic change to happen.
I think I'm happy to see people taking action, whether that's protesting, donating, looking at George Floyd's brother on Capitol Hill the other day after they had just had the funeral. The next day, he was there talking about police reform and things like that. So I think it's whatever you need to do and have acceptance and peace about that. So if that's for you marching, if it's for you making posters, flyers, having discussions like this, you know, whatever that looks like for you as a person of color or any other race, do that, you know, because I think the time is like we suppressed it for so long, and that now you see this rising up, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon until real changes are in place with the law. And we know that that's how things get done. And so for me, coping has looked like, you know, making my post and talking to others, talking to my family, talking to my friends, you know, but also having my other colleagues and friends say, hey, we support our Black friends. We support our other Black therapists. That meant a lot to me. I think I'm still in shock for seeing, you know, other people of other races and cultures saying, you know, they're chanting, you know, they're doing all these things. Like they're making the first move. They're taking or making the initiative to really understand us. And it just makes my heart smile because for so long we haven't had that support. So I think it's about just doing what you need to do and being okay with it.
I think one of the things that I want to share with the Black community is that as families, when I think about the discussions that have come about with my children in a different way, I'm encouraging families to have different type of dialogue about things. We often, as providers, if you work with younger children or teenagers, we're still in that process, I think, for many within our community to validate the voices of our children, validate the voices of our teens and our younger children. And you know, we often think about what our experience is as adults, but I think that this is also a time, you know, my son, having been in New York for 3 years now, he's a very different kid since Houston. As a musical theater major, as a young gay male, he's very much outspoken by comparison to when he was at home. And so to hear his thoughts and to be able to validate some of the things that he has experienced and to talk about things is something that I think collectively families can continually and intentionally do more effectively. So I would just encourage families to have greater open dialogue with each other.
And I love that point, Chris, and mine was similar about Black families being able to do whatever they need to do in this time. Because I think if you think about even as soon as slavery was over, no one gave us a roadmap, a plan on, okay, this is how you build your families back up that were torn apart. This is how you ensure your nothing. We've done everything on our own as a form of resistance. And so I think even being okay to recognize that this is not, as we know, just this moment, but generational trauma. And so with that, these conversations need to be had, but knowing that we are here as Black therapists. And so to me, that's why it's so important. I'm so grateful for Shameitra for putting this together, for even Black families to see, okay, there are Black therapists. And they do understand, like you even first asked Shameitra about us being Black and therapists, that we can't separate the two, so that it is up to us to do our healing. So I just think it would be so cool. I don't even know how to get this started, but like to have some therapists, as you know, go to in-home, like not just the traditional in-home therapy, but as we're gathering, how do we really bring our skills to these families that may never, you know, come into our therapy rooms? How can we be at the family reunion or whatever, just to really see how can we help to heal these generational traumas that have happened. But I think also what happens, the victim sometimes becomes, we start having this guilt trip. Oh my gosh, I should be at the protest. I should be doing this. You just being able to have a smile on your face is a form of resistance. You finding your joy, you making sure your kids are joyous. Like I have a 5-year-old son, and you know, just having that balance of how much do I expose him to now that I know once you're exposed to it, there's no going back, you know. But him asking me, why did this, like he saw the image of George Floyd losing his life, it being taken away from him, and having to explain, like, he's like, I just don't understand why that would happen. You're saying because his skin is Black, you know, like having to then, okay, if we're going to go there, how can I also ensure that my son is able to experience joy? Because to me, that's the biggest form of resistance. You deserve to be happy just like anybody else.
I was just going to piggyback off of Christine, because you guys have all said great things and all things that I encouraged for my Black clients as well, but also giving them the permission to be okay not doing as much, be okay taking care of their own family. I mean, on top of just the day-to-day struggles that a lot of families are going through with loss of jobs, and there's still COVID out there, and just our normal struggles, that this is an additional layer of that pressure to feel like you have to be out there and you have to give, and you know, like we are all collectively, Black people and others. This is racism. Social injustice is not just our burden to bear. right? Like it's everybody's burden to bear and everybody needs to be involved in it. And if you need time to step away, to have fun with your family, to decompress, to refuel, then that is okay also. Because as I told Christine and Shameitra, there were a couple days where I was just in it and I was like, well, I don't think I'm built to be an activist. Like I am drained. And I realized it takes a lot out of you. And it's okay. And it's important work, but there is also a time of rest, and being okay with resting as well. And knowing that that's a necessary part of being able to go out there with intention and energy and keep fighting the fight.
And understanding, I think that as, in the generational trauma, the way that we have dealt with it, we've been in survival. And so part of how we've coped with it is in the doing, feeling like I don't have time to stop, to think, to feel like, I have to get things done. So it's something that I think is so ingrained in who we are. And I remember Saudia and I were having a conversation because we had gotten into it on social media, kind of where we were kind of tag teaming with somebody who was just committed to staying where they were. And at a certain point in the conversation, Saudia was like, there's really no work that we can do here, Shameitra. So, and it was kind of like okay, sister, let's get ourselves out of this situation, but the next day something else had happened. And I remember Saudia responded so beautifully to a gentleman who, was sitting in this space, that there was no racism in an area, a suburb of Houston. And so Saudia did a lot of work that morning, and we were talking, and she had made a comment about, I'm tired and I can't give anymore. And I remember saying to her, it's okay for us to give ourselves the permission to rest, but two things can be held in that. Because I had went into when she talked about, I can't be an activist. And I was like, it is exhausting. So I could only imagine what my ancestors was going through. I'm over here having dialogue with people, in my air-conditioned office and home on computers, and, recognizing that and what their fight looked like, but also not letting that negate that I'm still exhausted, I'm still tired, and it is okay for me to be able to, in the way that I am being an activist, in the way that I am, coping and dealing, that it's okay for me in 2020 to still be exhausted. And so my job is not to quit. My job is just to rest, restore, rejuvenate, and then keep going. So I'm sorry, Ade, I cut in on you.
No, perfect. No, I appreciate the highlighting of the need for rest, because if I had to provide a message or offer something to Black folks everywhere, regardless of where we might come from or our backgrounds, is that, I am proud, strangely, of the fact that we have reached a time, if this is a moment, I don't really consider this a moment, I just consider it ongoing, but I'm proud of the fact that we've reached this moment where we are no longer willing or choosing to stay quiet. I'm proud of the fact that we are as vocal of a people as we are or have become. I'm extremely happy to hear us actually screaming out about our pain, because for so long we have been hushed into silence. And it always reminds me of what Zora Neale said. If you're silent about it, they'll kill you until you enjoyed it. And I feel like they've had their time of killing us and saying that we enjoyed it, saying that we caused it, saying that we were behind the fact that our lives were ripped away from us, and we finally reached a point where we're like, nah, actually that's not it. And actually that's never been it, right? So we're not just telling the story of now, we're telling the story of 50 years ago, of 100 years ago, of 300 and 400 years ago. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because we can't begin to heal. We can't even begin to emancipate if we're not first willing to acknowledge the fact that we're hurt and we're bleeding. So my message would be to continue to do that. If you're tired, say you're tired. If you're exhausted, say you're exhausted. If you're hurting, if somebody's hurting you or somebody's killing you, say that. Say that so that not only you can acknowledge it, but other people around you can acknowledge it, because nobody knows there's a problem if you don't make clear that there is one.
In the acknowledgement of, frustration and exhaustion, I know that oftentimes we're also dealing with depression, anxiety, and grief that is occurring, during these times of COVID, during these times of racial injustice. And so I just want us to talk a little bit about what are the symptomology of depression and grief and anxiety that you see? What does it look like, but also I think, what does it sound like? Because there are a lot of, people that are trying to figure out, because we're not in proximity with one another like we typically are as well with COVID-19. How do I identify when somebody in my family is struggling with this, or when it's, happening within me, and how can I be of help? And so just wanting to have us talk about what that looks like, what that sounds like, in order to be able to answer some of those questions.
What I have been experiencing specifically with a lot of my clients around issues of grief and depression and even heightened anxiety is a lot of irritability. And I stress that and separate it because in my experiences, what that has led to disturbances within relationships. And so not so much a personal feeling of, oh my God, this makes me angry, but more of a relational issue of, you got to get away from me, or I can't stand when you do this, or why can't we just get along, or the up and down roller coaster ride of what it is like to be with someone while being in quarantine and while not being able to do things you would normally do. So heightened irritability has been something that I have noticed a lot of. And with that irritability, I would say something else that I've noticed a lot of is silence. There's been a lot of silence from folks, in relationship or existing and sharing space with other people, in that the situation is just so stressful that some of my clients and people that I've encountered have reached a point where they don't necessarily know what to do. And so because they don't know what to do, they don't do anything. They don't say anything. And what ends up happening is it allows the issue or issues to fester and grow and become worse off than they would be had communication been taken as a route.
I think that as I think about this a little bit more, I think that for many of my clients, the entire experience of sheltering in place, many of them were struggling with just that, not being outside their homes, regular routines having significantly changed. Definitely experienced clients who lost employment, things of that nature. But I think some of the typical things that we would see from a depression standpoint, just simply not having that interaction, spending more time. Many of my teen clients, as well as some of my adult clients without children, would talk about how they have gone several days without speaking to people at times, how they have found themselves in a significant measure of isolation. And I think that then when we add all of the social unrest at the time and what's taken place, I think that some of those same clients are processing what they're experiencing less than they potentially would if we were not facing the pandemic at the same time. I think that many of those clients are now they've definitely shown a a greater aspect of isolation during this time, not even intended, but it's happened that way. Clients dealing with anxiety, I have several clients that work out on offshore type things. So the fear of being companions, being out in environments where they tend to think their life has always been at risk, but in a position now where that risk might be greater based upon the energy that is taking place within the country. I think a lot of these different factors are playing in many of the clients that we see on a regular basis, and those symptoms are similar to what we would see, anytime as it relates to depression and anxiety, but it seems as though intriguing, trying to inspire them to speak more specifically about their experience and how it relates partially to the pandemic and partially to the things that are related to the protests and a variety of other emotional things that they experience has been probably the most challenging piece. But I think those same symptoms have existed prior to this moment, this time. But I think there's more to that silence, more to that that isolation now than it has been before.
I've heard people talk about a lack of sleep, and then also physical symptoms, just like where they're just having physical symptoms and go to the doctor, and the doctor is saying it's due to stress. There's no physical cause of what's going on. And I feel like more now than ever, I've seen people who are just experiencing multiple traumas at the same time. Like there's COVID, and then there's racial injustice, and then there, the grandmother that raised them or their favorite uncle passed away. Like things, there's just so many things, it seems like, for whatever reason, is happening at once. And so I would just encourage people to reach out to loved ones. Don't try to cope on your own, and reach out to therapists. Like that's what we're here for. We're here to help you through the difficult times. Like just know that you don't have to do it by yourself. We were created to need each other, and that's okay.
I think my clients, I guess I can't really say there's been one constant thing that I've seen with my clients. It's a lot of the same symptoms intensified. However, I have noticed, so symptomology, not sleeping, like anxiety levels are through the roof. So, a lot of my clients talk of digestive issues, and there's more like sinus infections, and their bodies are carrying a lot of the stress and the trauma now. I feel like some of my clients, or a lot of my clients, have felt that they were the reason why their lives were so out of control prior to this. And now it's like they've thrown their hands up and they're like, the whole world's out of control. I don't know what to do. So what's some of this internal work? Because I talk a lot about we can't control the things that happen outside of us. We don't know how to cure COVID. We can't fix social and racial injustice all in one day. So it's not about finding stability and foundation out there. It's about finding it inside of yourself. And what I feel like a lot of my clients have kind of just surrendered and said, okay, now what's this internal piece that I need to work on? Because I don't have a job, and I can't go see my mom, and I can't connect to people. So how do I find peace within myself? They've been more receptive to that. But yes, there's been definitely an increase of the bodily symptoms. My teenage clients, for whatever reason, I don't know, I haven't processed it enough, they have been struggling more, and more with the social, racial issues, in terms of all of my teenage clients are actively suicidal. I've had a lot more have to walk parents through higher levels of care and things like that. And like I said, I haven't been able to really process why for them a lot of the world, I think, you know, as a kid, maybe you feel like the world is a good place and you have so much hope. And I still do believe the world is a good place, but when you see all of these things happening and you're still have, you know, you're a teenager, it could be very disheartening. And then you don't have as much agency to go out and do things on your own. So then you feel trapped maybe and hopeless in this collective chaos. But that's what I've seen.
Y'all kind of went into answering the next question that I was thinking, because y'all were talking about how your clients are showing up, but the impact of trauma and in the Black experience and how it's showing up in your office. So is there anything else that you want to add that is, you know, specifically to that? I know, you know, I'll cut in for me. I've had a few clients that's called and they've been new clients. So I think, you know, clients that I already have a rapport with, they already know that their healing space is for all that they need for it to be. You know, I'm very, I'm very insistent with my clients of helping them to try not to compartmentalize and, well, I came to you for this, but now this is coming up for me and I don't understand why this is part of what I'm in here raging about. And I'm like, because you are a human being. And so a lot of times the way that we process things is we think that it's situational. But if I am thinking about the helplessness that I'm feeling as I watch George Floyd take his last breath and beg for his last breath, my body remembers just like my mind remembers. And so my body thinks of, when was the last moment that I felt helpless? And maybe it was when I was a caregiver for a family member that passed away, and the time before that. And so your body takes the accumulation of all those things, and that is what, you know, shows up in your healing experience. But I have had, and particularly I've had Black women that have called and they've been new clients, and it's like, I just need a space where I can be raw and I can be visceral about how I feel. I don't know what exactly I need from you other than needing for you to just be somebody to hold that space for me. And so I'm hearing that a lot, and I'm happy that people are giving themselves the permission to say, I'm going to come in there and I'm going to let it all out. I had one client call. She was like, I'm already apologizing for my language. And I'm like, bring it, because that's what you need. You need that release. So as hard as 2020 has been overall, where people are like, I'm holding so much that I have to let it out. And I think the way that it's showing up is I can't ignore, I can't avoid, I can't deny. And they are allowing for themselves to erupt in a way that is healthier. I just think that they need to continue to be reminded that the resources are here and there are spaces where they can safely erupt. But that is kind of the silver lining for me of what 2020 has given, because it's come with so much.
And I do think, kind of to your point, Shameitra, of course, you know, it's so much tragedy and it's so compounded, but I do think for a lot of us, now there's a way to at least name it. Like, I'm not crazy. Yeah. This is not just something that, you know, we just were talking about or that we were feeling, but no, there's like a name to my pain. So even if it's, dang, I just need to, like you said, have a space, if it's with my friends, if it's with a therapist, if it's with my family, for us to be. And I think what, to me, I've seen that is beautiful is the types of conversations that are coming up with families, with friends, where we're creating intentional spaces to process it, to check in, to even, I may not have talked to you in a while, but I know you're feeling it. So like just even the connections that are coming out, and I think the work that's going to come out from this, I think there's going to be fruit, because I think for so long, a lot of our work as Black people has been devalued, you know, like not even devalued, like it's just been invisible, like just so marginalized, where now it's like, no, our work matters, what we're doing, it has always mattered, but now there really are new platforms. And that's one thing I think has to come in balance, because even when I'm thinking about how much all of us take on as far as new clients or new projects or new panel discussions or whatever, to have a balance of, yes, this is needed, but at the same time, like you were saying, Shameitra, that's kind of been a trauma response to always just be busy, just be active, just be doing something. So that way you don't have to feel, you don't have to cope, because it is so heavy. So I think now we are trying to come into balance as far as how can we, of course, stay resistant, but then also make sure that we're healing.
Absolutely.
I just want to add, just listening, I think that's been the thing that's been happening. People are having to sit with their feelings since you can't go anywhere, you're in quarantine. So a lot of clients are coming, like they're coming more now, they're starting to realize I do need some additional support. I need a space to be heard. I need to be validated in what I'm feeling and just be able to just be, because a lot of them are, a lot of people are alone, or, they're not able to reach out and connect with their family members and friends like they, were able to do before. So I think the quarantine is forcing a lot of us to have to kind of sit and deal with some stuff that we haven't dealt with in years, because we're always, out with our friends, at the gym, at happy hour, going to dinner, whatever it is, Sunday fun day. And when all of that stopped, you were left with yourself. And so now it's like, okay, wait a minute. I do have a lot of stuff that's unresolved, a lot of unfinished business, and I need to get a handle on it. So I think for me, that's been the thing that's been really driving, clients and coming.
We're here and being a representation of Black therapists that are here and supportive and available. But overall, when we think about the mental health community, what are your thoughts on what responsibilities do we have as a community within itself to, continue to be advocates, to be able to come together as colleagues and speak about what is needed? Because at the end of the day, iron sharpen iron. And, and we're all needing to be the best that we can be for the people who are coming in, because I personally feel that emotionally disrobing is harder than physical disrobing, the vulnerability that comes with that, and needing for people to know that they're walking into spaces where they are going to be handled in the most respectful and tender way. So what are responsibilities do you think that our mental health community has to all of the communities, to the healing, for healing?
I think there's many ways. Two that come to mind is education, and actually getting involved in like a community organization, activism, just something else outside of just the overall like entity itself. But to the education part, I mean, I think we all know it. Most of us, unless we went to HBCU, have learned from a white male Eurocentric perspective on what mental health is. And some people don't even know, the works of like W.B. Du Bois or like anyone else outside of, maybe just a conversation or just what you watched on PBS. So we need to really change just how we educate people on mental health. We have to include, that true diversity in this narrative of what's going on, these experiences. I know we always had this one diversity class that ultimately, is a hit or miss, but depending on who you are in that class. But we really need to address like systemic racism and systematic racism at its core, and not even just in the classroom setting, but what we actually teach our students and also our future therapists about, because there's a lot of therapists that are not competent when it comes to understanding people that do not look like them. They walk into that room with that implicit bias stemming from like everything else that they've learned about what it is to be white or what it is to not be Black. And then they try to impose that onto someone else. So we need to go ahead and change that system all up. The other part of it too is, again, being more active in the community in different ways, because we are organizing, because we are protesting, because we are more active in terms of exercising our voice. We also might experience burnout and we need additional support. So we need that support in mental health professionals in that way, but also for us to utilize our voices in this space to advocate for the importance of what this means as a whole. Like, taking care of the issues that we are fighting for right now is going to help us heal and help us mentally and spiritually. So I think we need to find ways to become more involved in local politics, community politics, just what's going on with the individuals that are outside of that four walls that you have that's, a therapy session with. So two things that stand out to me, man. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought up education. Brought up education, G. because I was going to say the exact same thing. But I want to take it a step further and say I feel like a personal responsibility of everyone in the mental health professional community is first to acknowledge that we've been colonized in our own education.
Mm-hmm.
We need a white Eurocentric perspective on psychology, period, flat out. I mean, I've yet to meet a single person that has even mentioned the Nile River Valley or those people's study of the interconnectedness of body and mind to the earth that we exist on. That alone just tells me that we have unlearning to do. I think that a personal responsibility of everyone in this community is to first admit that there's a lot that we don't know about ourselves and about our history and where we've come from, because you can't start changing if you're not admitting. And so to that end, I think that we can use a lot of study, like you said, G, around political issues, especially. I've heard a few different of my colleagues say that, you know, they don't get involved in politics or they don't discuss politics, and that's not something they touch on because it has nothing to do with the work, so to speak. But in the activism community, the personal is political.
Yep.
We don't have a luxury to be able to say, oh, I'm not going to touch the politics, because the politics directly impacts all of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so how do you not educate yourself on the politics? How do you not be culturally competent, ethnically competent, socially competent in that way, and expect to do the best and be the best for your clients? It's actually not possible. And the quicker that we can sit with ourselves and say that we got work to do, is the quicker we can begin to be our best selves to then step up and add our perspective to the overall conversation.
Is there a way, you can let me know if not, Shameitra, but if maybe Ade, Giancarlo can just talk a little bit about what's on your plate as far as activism, therapy, like how do you balance, like some therapists are like, well, I don't even know what I would do or how I would get connected in that way. So I'm just curious. I don't know if that fits, Shameitra, but I'm just curious.
Oh, no, that is perfect. Please share.
You want to go? You want to take it, or you want me to?
Boy, you got it, man. You know, I'm getting back into it, man. So I'm keeping up on the meetings now.
Honestly, Dr. Belliard, it starts with what you just did. It really is that simple. It starts with just asking a question, saying that I don't know, saying that I want to know, because half the time we don't even know that people want to know. Like, you know, that's half the battle. If we have buy-in, we can go far, you know. Mm-hmm. And then it's just about picking a place to start. So, like me personally, I espouse James Baldwin. He's my idol. He's where I come from on a lot of different things, and he has spoken on the human factor of a plethora of issues that have plagued Black people in this country, right? And so I usually start there, and I direct people to the fire next time. Depending on if you're coming from like the lens of like sexuality or gender issues, things like that, I would direct people to someone like Bell Hooks, especially if you're dealing with men and dealing with aspects of love, because that's what she talks about a lot in some of her most famous books. I just got done rereading this book, The Will to Change. It's by Bell Hooks, and it's all about men and masculinity and how we view love and how we work within the confines of love, and what all of that means for our existence, and not just for men's existence, but for people's existence, because there's no community without men, just like there's no community without women.
No, I mean, even like, okay, I want to be an activist and do more. So just that maybe you could talk about like what you do in the community, you know, so that you get an idea of like what that actually looks like. Because I think you're a really good representation of really making the personal political as a therapist. You and Giancarlo, and I'm sure other on the call, just because I know, you know, some things you're involved.
So in addition to doing stuff like that, like the readings and things, because those become a part of political education programs, which is something that Dream Defenders regularly does. really just finding ways to volunteer. A lot of people ask me how do they get involved with Dream Defenders, and my response is usually like, hey, just show up to an event. Like, look out for us, watch the flyers, watch the posters that go up, see what's happening, and be open, be willing enough to just set your own viewpoints aside and step out and be with the people and just see what folks need. You know, and we do literally everything from food drives to clothing drives to showing up to court hearings, and we do court watches, and we have lawyers that are within our ranks, and they sometimes take up the mantle of defense for going against people that are getting railroaded by the system.
Town hall meetings too.
Yeah, town hall meetings. I mean, what else? What else, G?
I think you named most of them outside of the ones that we're thinking about. Obviously, you know, protesting and demonstrations. Man, I think you touched on them.
Yeah, I just wanted
and I will also add on to what Ade is also talking about, and don't feel like you can't start something or do something on your own either. I got a text last night. I mean, unfortunately, I couldn't give her as much as she was asking for, but she wanted to to organize a protest, talking with the county. I mean, sorry, not the county, with the community where she wanted to do it at, and I just told her right now, just my energy just ain't got. I can't do it. But I will definitely find a way to support you. But it was great to see that people are feeling the need to do more and reaching out to resources to get information on how to do it. You know what I mean? So I think the good part about what's going on now is that, you know, we don't have to feel like there's this pressure for us to do everything, because now there are people that are taking this load off of us. And all we're able to do now is just provide that resources, that guidance for them to continue to work. You know, growing up, I was always told, man, I could not save the world by myself. And I was like, all right, cool. But I always believe that if I can get one or two people to think the same way that I do, you know what I mean, and continue to motivate the people around them, then everyone's going to be able to contribute to that goal, you know? So I think where we're at right now is at a place where there are organizations that are established, and there are people that are trying to either be a part of these organizations, but also are just open to doing things that are in line with what we're trying to do, which I think is the best part. And I think what we can do is to reinforce that, facilitate that, educate them, provide resources when necessary, and do the best we can to support this overall cause.
Y'all already got the conversation started where I want to go in the last question, which is, what are some of your favorite resources that you utilize for your own self-care, that you often give out to your clients that come to you, that you would like to share with who the audience that may be watching this and that may be helpful for them?
I tend to just encourage most of my clients to do some of the basic things. May sound silly, but for those who want to kind of get closer to nature, I encourage people to explore gardening as a way of coping, as a way of seeing something grow from their own hands. I encourage folks who aren't as inclined to get out and do a lot of physical exercise, just to get out and do some walking on a daily basis. You can actually accomplish a couple of things if you're walking with your family or companion. And, those are some of the greatest opportunities for dialogue to take place during that time period. I just think that there are some things that are might be considered small but practical things that people can do individually and as a family when they're trying to cope and trying to manage with all the things that are heavy for them at the time.
Yeah, I won't say it for everyone, but for, respectively for some clients, when we work with them, journaling helps. I mean, in general, if we're just talking about it for people, even if you're not someone that cares to really write, I think there's a good opportunity for you to get more clarity with your thoughts and just to get things off your chest when you write it. Because the cool thing about it is that, how you feel on Monday and what you wrote on Monday might be completely different, actually 10 minutes later, but it will definitely be different that following day. And, you could definitely use that to look back at your growth, your change, or what was different about who you were in those moments. But then again, you know, it varies, but I think I would definitely encourage that. Another thing is to simply just encourage people to find out what the heck they want, because it changes. And, you know, and then also find out what gets in the way of what they want. Because a lot of times we say we want to do something, and the closer we get to whatever that is, we find ourselves doing the complete opposite to not get it. And just having that internal conversation for what it is for themselves. And, you know, it seems to be very helpful for a lot of people, from at least from my experience.
And I just wanted to add some other organizations that are just a plethora of a good place for resource and support. I know Melanin and Mental Health is an organization that I have two close friends who are the co-founders of it. And so they are always giving different resources, events that's happening in the community. They have a directory where you can outreach to Brown and Black therapists from all across. If you're looking for a therapist, there's also therapy for Black girls with Dr. Joy, who's an absolutely wonderful resource as well. And there was one another one that Fab Moms is another great organization, and with Dr. Christine there, that is about Black moms, fabulous mom adopting, and Black adoptees and families. And so you can speak a little bit more to it, Christine.
I appreciate you sharing the resources, Melanin and Mental Health, Therapy for Black Girls, Fabulous Adoptive Black Moms. So I am a Black adoptive mom. I make no secret about it. And what I've learned in my journey is that Black adoption really is a form of resistance. If you think about Black lives mattering, the most vulnerable Black lives have to matter. And unfortunately, we have a high rate of Black children who are in foster care right now. And so the power of even fostering, if you can foster, adopting, if you can adopt our children, but even if you can't, just be an activist, be supportive of Black adoption. The reason I say this, and again, I'm not going to go on a tangent because you know I can. This is my last sentence on this. But a lot of times, when I talked earlier about decolonizing our own minds, when we think about even our own thoughts about foster care, usually we perpetuate racism or stereotypes when it comes to foster kids, what have you. But this idea that usually their experiences are symbolic of what has happened to Black people in this country. Their parents were trying to cope, usually, with a system that was inhumane towards them based even just on their race. So anyway, there are over 100,000 Black kids in care today, and they're literally praying for a Black mom, a Black dad. So for me, that's just such a form of resistance. So Fabulous Adoptive Black Moms, we are just trying to advocate for Black adoption. I know there are a lot of other resources. So I'm so glad you are going to do the resource page. I think, and I just agree with the journaling and then the connecting. And to me, I just know that our relationships are a form of resistance. So even if it's friends, if it's an intimate relationship, community groups, I agree with what Adejare was saying. Just start somewhere to get involved, because I do think pain, it just resides in isolation. So just finding a way to connect, in any way that makes sense for you.
And I'm just gonna systemically, since family therapist and me, gonna swing it over to Dr. Teandra Gordon, because as we're talking about Fab Moms, we're also talking about purpose-filled parenting. And so she also has a book and does speaking. And so Dr. Gordon is also another powerful resource that we have here in the Houston community. So if you want to speak a little bit more, Teandra.
Sure, thank you so much. That was so nice. I completely, like when you were talking about like adopting, I think that parenting and parenting education is a big form of resistance as well. If we can, because in my experience, the majority of parents love their kids and want what's best for them. They just don't always know what that is, or they're so stuck in their own trauma that it's hard to give their kids what they need. And so through parenting education, there's the simultaneous thing of helping people to process their own experiences and also to learn how to be intentional about the environment and the interactions that they're having with their kids. And I think that if we can foster a generation of children that are raised in nurturing and loving environments, then we really can foster change and healing of the generational traumas that we've experienced. And so this is my book, Purposeful Parenting, and it actually stems how it came about was during my doctoral research. I interviewed Black parents about the things that influenced the people that they became, and in turn what they thought it took to be successful in raising kids. And so the themes, each chapter is a result of the themes that emerged from that grounded therapy research. And at first I was going to make it a book targeted towards Black parents, but as I started to present my research, I realized how much all cultures related to the themes that were embedded in each book. So I think that one critique of parenting material is that it's not about Black people or from Black people. Well, this actually is this is from the wisdom and the experiences of Black families, and I think this wisdom can really help families of all cultures all across the world.
Okay, Ade, take us home. Because I've interrupted you multiple times.
They were welcomed interruptions. That was all good information. I have to echo what G said about journaling, and I want to expand on that and say, Black folk, go explore the arts. Please get into the art. I mean, we are some of the most creative people to be, period, right? And so it only seems and feels right that we explore all things creative, whether that's being outside in nature or the art of movement and dance or painting or writing, like G said. I know specifically for myself, I engage in writing a lot. That's one of the ways that I personally cope with everything that's going on. And like others here, I have written my share of books as well, except my books are books of poetry. And I highlight art because sometimes we don't exactly have the words to put together to be able to describe our experience, and art provides that. Art provides alternative methods of saying what is unsaid or is struggling to be said. And so, like I said, I've written 2 books of poetry. You can find both of them on my website. The site is thetjtherapist.com, and T as in transformative, J as in justice, therapist.com. And my first book was called In Silence, and my second book was called Getting Through. And they're personal poems. I've written all of them myself, they're original works, and it just comes from the lens of being Black, a man, a son, a brother, a human being, and hoping for and wishing for peace and love and enlightenment and all things good in this lifetime. So
beautiful, beautiful. And I would also like to add, I am a energy healer in training. And so as you all talk about, being grounded and getting in touch with nature and, the arts, recognizing that there are also alternative spaces for healing as well. And it's interesting because I think as Black people, traditional therapy is an alternative space. So, but part of my work in being an energy healer is really, it goes back to all of that. It's going back to our ancestral connection to, divine healing. So I will, in this show, from my couch to your couch, have energy healers on, have women of color in energy healer, also introducing that into our men of color. But it's pretty powerful. It is an ancestral connection. And the way that I describe it is really similar. I think as Black people, we're used to maybe grandma or big mama talking about her sense of discernment and somebody's energy being off, and, having that connection to earth, and that there's an energetic form. So we already do it. It's a part of our culture already. But, I know that there's this relationship with religion and how that has brought us through, but also looking at even the colonization aspect of that. But energy healing is definitely a resource, and that I'll be speaking more on, and that I will add to what all of the wonderful resources that you all are speaking of as well. So, I want to tell y'all thank you so very much for joining on this Sunday. I know you all had a lot going on, but I really love that when I had this ideal of, gathering Black therapists and people that I knew and trusted, and I know they're out there doing the good work. You all answered without hesitation and with so much passion. And I think that's important for the audience that's watching this to know. Ade and Giancarlo, y'all are new friends. I'm so happy that Christine introduced me, and I am so happy that y'all have entered into this world of mental health, because wow, we need powerful people that's coming in and carrying this forward. And so it's awesome to be able to be connected with y'all and y'all's, soon to be full therapist status. And so, and all of, Teandra, Christine, Anetria, thank you all. Y'all are colleagues, but y'all are also friends. And I appreciate you for being on this platform. And this has been cathartic for me as well. And I needed to be in this space with you all. So thank you so much.